I don't think people really succeed in life without taking some risks. Do crazy things to really change the world.
Thanks so much for joining us for this Goldman Sachs talk session, which is part of our 2023 Alternative Summit here at Goldman Sachs in New York City. I'm Susie Scher, and I'm chair of our Global Financing Group within Global Banking and Markets here. And I'm so happy to be sitting here today with Gwynne Shotwell, who is president and COO of SpaceX. Today, we're going to talk about Gwynne's leadership of SpaceX, the fast-evolving world of space travel and commerce, and the latest technologies SpaceX and Starlink are using to revolutionize the industry. Gwynne was inducted into the National Academy of Engineering and was also honored by the Rotary National Award for Space Achievement Foundation's 2023 National Space Trophy. She's done many more successful things in both her career and in the world of space travel, all of which we'll get to today. On a personal level, she is one of my idols, and I can't help but saying it, and I debated this with my kids. I'm over the moon to have her here. Gwynne, thanks so much for joining us today. Let's dig in. We work with a lot of leaders from the bleeding edge of technology, but I think it's safe to say there's nothing more futuristic than outer space. I have a personal question for you and also a professional one. Don't worry, it's not too personal. Let's start with a personal one. What got you inspired and interested in space? When did it hit you that this was where you wanted to focus your career?
Actually, I was not a space nerd as a kid. I was a car nerd, so I should probably be working at Tesla. But I kind of fell into this industry. I was looking for a job after my bachelor's degree, and I ran into one of my former professors, and he was working in Los Angeles at the Aerospace Corporation. And so I interviewed and got the job there, but that was my first role in space, actually.
Most people have a basic understanding that satellites are key to so many aspects of our lives. But what's a deeper understanding of the value of space transport and exploration you feel is missing in the public discourse?
I mean, human nature is a nature of exploration, right? And going beyond what we know and searching for new ideals, learning new things. And space is this very unexplored, I mean, literally unexplored, regardless of the decades that we've put into space exploration. By percentage, it is unexplored. And I feel like we aren't human if we don't go seek out what there is to learn in space. And I think robotic exploration is great as precursor missions, but we need to get out to other planets and certainly out to other stars. I think that's how you find out how we came to exist. What is our future going to be like? How can we save humanity? I think those answers are in space.
These topics are huge, almost overwhelming. I want to see the Starship launch, but I'm not going to ask you if I can go to space. I just want everybody to know that. Right now, space is a destination for satellites and large government efforts involving science and exploration. But let's spin this forward, say 10 years or 20 years. What will we be seeing in regard to space that we don't see today? Is it tourism? Is it hypersonic travel? Something else that I haven't asked about?
I think it's those things and more. I think we probably will land humans on the surface of Mars in roughly a decade. We certainly should launch humans and land them on the surface of the moon in less than that. And we're working on that program with NASA. It's called the Artemis program. By the way, Artemis is the sister of Apollo, so very appropriate. So certainly I believe there will be a permanent presence on the moon, and we will just start building a settlement on Mars. And then I think it's really important to take what we have collectively learned in those really insane endeavors and figure out how we go to the next star system.
Progress at the leading edge of anything is a game of inches. How do you think about progress at SpaceX and projects like Starship when dealing with exponentially higher degrees of complexity?
So Starship, I talked about going to the moon and going to Mars and hopefully going beyond. Starship is the vehicle that will take us there. And it will be an evolutionary vehicle, right? The Falcon 9 is our kind of workhorse rocket that we're flying. We'll fly roughly 100 times this year. Hopefully we fly 144 times next year. And what we learned in the Falcon program, for those of you that don't know, rockets generally are single use. First of all, rockets are expensive, and to toss them after one flight seems horrifying. So the technology leap that we had at SpaceX was reuse, and we reused the first stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. Starship, the evolution is we will reuse both the first and the second stage. So the entire vehicle stack will go on its mission and will come back to the launch pad. Much like an aircraft, we like to land very near the launch pad, if not on the launch pad, refill the rocket with the propellants, and relaunch again, same day, within hours. Our flight rate at roughly 100 this year, it far surpasses like nations' flight rate. In fact, I think we will end up putting about 100 million tons of satellite and cargo into orbit, and the rest of the world will put roughly 10% of that. The rest of the world will put 10% of that up. And so reusing both the first stage and the second stage is critical to move humans to other planets. And let me give you a little explanation of why. If you don't reuse the spacecraft, the trip is one way. And though we might want to launch some of our neighbors to Mars on a one-way trip, in order to facilitate a settlement on Mars and true human exploration, you want to drop folks off, you want to bring the asset back, you want to take more people. And if you happen to land on Mars and not love it, some people might not love living on Mars, then they are going to want to come back.
I remember when I, first met you all, I met Brett at some conference like this, but for bankers instead of investors, so it was not nearly as fun. I remember first understanding the reusability thing, and that you were the only ones doing it. So keep going, because we all think about, oh, there's a whole bunch of different space companies. No, there's nobody like SpaceX, and this is at the core. So
and others are trying, and they will eventually get there. But it took us quite a long time to be able to get reuse working and operational. So benefits of reuse, more than not one-way trips to Mars and the Moon. When you send your rocket on a mission and you bring it back, you get to examine it. How did it fare during the mission? Are there cracks in the hull? Are the engines wearing faster than we thought? So you can actually improve the design, make it more reliable for people. And since we were founded to take people to other planets, this is really a critical feature. Now, we're with a group of folks that care deeply about the finances. Reusing the rocket is enormously beneficial to the bottom line, you can imagine. A rocket costs roughly what it costs an airplane to build, roughly, orders of magnitude. And if you toss that airplane after one flight, you can imagine we would not be flying around the world. Society would be very different, and the airline industry would be in far worse shape than it is. Same with the rocket industry. You reuse those assets, it makes the bottom line far greater. So it's a reliability feature, it's a financial feature, and if you want to talk about the environment, I think rocket hulls falling back to Earth and really polluting the oceans is not a great look either. So we want to bring our assets back, refurbish them, refly them, and in the case of Starship, no refurbishment. Just like an aircraft, land on the pad, refill, and fly again within an hour would be great. My guess it'll be a few.
That would be absolutely incredible. Let's pivot a little bit. Your background's in engineering. You're running a company that's well over $100 billion. How was that transition for you from builder, from engineer, from car geek turned space geek to business leader?
So moving into business, and by the way, I still try to keep my tentacles in engineering because I'm kind of at core an engineer. I don't get to do much engineering. Maybe analyzing proposals is maybe as much engineering as I get to do. But I'm a collaborator, team builder, and one of the things that I find with engineers is in engineering, it's the interface between engineering groups, between engineers themselves, where failures and issues really manifest themselves. And so I feel like I'm a people engineer. Engineering groups, engineering, interpersonal engineering back and forth. So that's my engineering.
But running a company of engineers, you must have tremendous credibility, given that you are an engineer.
It's helpful, actually, but it's incredibly helpful with customers, especially when you're launching a new technology. Customers have lots of technical questions. And if you're like, well, I don't know, let me go find that answer, I'm not sure, you kind of build some doubt in the minds of customers. But being able to respond immediately to their questions or their concerns, I think, is helpful to close the deal.
So you're the company's best salesperson as well.
I think that is probably my greatest contribution to the company.
Interesting. I want to talk about Starlink a little, which, as we know, or hope you know, is a global network of more than 5,000 satellites that provide internet access around the world. This is a massive opportunity to increase access to the internet, which we know is key to addressing societal inequalities in education and living standards. How big a challenge is it to get more connectivity to more people? And where is SpaceX/Starlink on that journey?
So we are very early in our journey with Starlink. We've got a little over 2 million customers right now. I think we'll get to 2.5 by the end of the year. Our goal is to connect anybody on the planet that wants to be connected, maybe even those that don't know they should be connected, and help connect them as well. Our first customers, we really wanted to kind of help. And so some of our first customers were indigenous people and communities, schools. Chile, we connected a school in Chile. I was in the Amazon last fall, and we brought a Starlink terminal to a school and to a neighborhood that had never had connectivity. Super cool. It was like one of my favorite days at SpaceX. I still have the photo on my phone. This school had about 80 kids, from little tinies to high school, and I got hugs from all of them. We connected to Elon. We actually did a call with Elon to this school of students, and it was really amazing. There are probably 100 or 150 customers of rockets on the planet, but there's 8 billion potential customers for Starlink, and so the connective tissue between what we're doing on Starlink and the employees at SpaceX and kind of connecting to the human race, it's just much more direct. I mean, we think we're doing cool things for humanity with rockets and Starship and, putting people on the surface of the moon and putting people on Mars and hopefully further. But connecting with individuals and getting hugs from little kids because they've never been connected to the outside world before is pretty amazing.
Incredible story. I heard another incredible story about Starlink when the war in Ukraine first started. You all have been instrumental to rescue and recovery efforts around the world, whether it's war or natural disaster. Can you give us a couple little examples of that? Maybe you want to talk about Ukraine, and we had been talking to SpaceX about helping them connect with some NGOs. We thought Goldman were clever. We're going to connect them with some NGOs to help them get terminals to places in natural disaster and war. And the SpaceX team said, NGOs take 4 to 6 months. Let me tell you the story about what happened when the war broke out in Ukraine. I love that story. If you're comfortable telling it,
sure,
it'd be great.
Sure. So we all kind of knew there were tensions growing in Ukraine, and we were working quite hard with the regulator in Ukraine. Like, come on, please give us permission to operate Starlink. We think it will be enormously helpful for your fight for freedom, which we all kind of knew was going to happen. Regulators are a conservative group of folks, and it takes months, sometimes years, to get permission to operate in a country. And anyhow, Russia invaded, and then we got a tweet. I think it was a tweet at that time. It was not an X post from the regulator in Ukraine saying, "Let's have Starlink." So we took that as our legal license to go ahead and operate in Ukraine, and we had terminals there 2 days later. It was not easy. We did have one USAID aircraft that took over a few hundred terminals. We hired other commercial airliners to get pallets of terminals into Ukraine. And I think it was really a game changer because their comm system had gone down. They were using geosynchronous capability, which is much easier to target. And so their system went down, and Starlink was there within days, operating and helping out. And so it's evolved. There's 70,000 or more terminals in Ukraine right now. And I think it's really been a game changer for their fight for freedom.
Let's pivot a little bit and talk about the company and what it's like to work there. It's known for its young workforce, powered by many recent graduates. And by the way, not all of you are going to get an invite to go there, but it's the only company I've ever seen that builds its product in the middle of its office. So you go to the cafeteria, you eat a bite with Gwynne, you see a few NASA astronauts in their jumpsuits, and then you walk past humans in this giant glass box that are also, they're actually building rockets next to the cafeteria. I'm not making this up, true story. So this young workforce, this energized workforce, this workforce that works 24/7 and is developing the future of space travel and communications, what are the main attributes you and the team and Elon look for when you're hiring? And do you hire mostly out of undergrad? Or are you looking for grad students? We'd love to hear a little bit about the culture of SpaceX.
Sure. So I think the most important characteristics for there's three for a successful employee at SpaceX. First of all, you have to have kind of raw, innate intelligence. You don't have to necessarily be skilled in an area because smart people will learn, right? And there's a lot of people that already have skills at SpaceX that they can learn from as well. So raw intelligence and motivation, incredibly important. We really want self-starters. We want every employee to act like a CEO of the company and find issues and go solve issues, even if it's not within their swim lane, so to speak. And then so there's two. And the third is if you've had success somewhere else, you will likely have success at SpaceX. And so we ask questions during interviews, like, tell me about a thing that you did really well. Tell me about a project that you were really successful with. So those three things.
And you guys have had just tremendous success in your tenure at SpaceX, so you're doing something right. Let's talk about you a little bit. You were a good student in high school. As you said, you weren't interested in space. And as it turns out, I don't really believe this, but it says this here, you weren't all that interested in math and science.
Yeah, that's not right.
Not true. Okay.
Not right. Physics was my favorite class.
That.
Yeah.
So your favorite class was what?
I was not interested in engineering as a high school student.
Okay, got it.
Because I didn't know what an engineer was. My mother was an artist. My father was a physician. And I had no idea what an engineer was. In fact, the only thing I knew about engineers, there were engineers on a train, that's what an engineer is.
So is this a true story? Your mom booked you a panel at the Society of Women Engineers?
That is true.
And you met a mechanical engineer who inspired you. Who was she, and what effect did she have on you?
Yeah, so my mom did drag me as an ornery teenager, very ornery teenager, to a Society of Women Engineers event at the Illinois Institute of Technology. I grew up in a little town north of Chicago. So on a Saturday, she took me down to IIT. Again, I was like, why am I going to this dumb thing, right? And there was a panel of engineers. There was a chemical engineer, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, and one other, and I don't remember. But the mechanical engineer was doing, from my perspective, the most interesting work. She was very well spoken, and she was by far the best dressed. So I'm like, I want to be her.
So you picked out your role model. How old were you?
I think I was 15.
Wow. I can't even believe you went. Like trying to get my 14-year-old to go to a thing on a Saturday to listen to a bunch of engineers.
I know, I can't believe I went either, but thank goodness, right?
You probably weren't as ornery as you remember yourself being.
I think I was pretty ornery.
We'll talk about that later. So you worked at several companies before you went to SpaceX. Chrysler, as you said, the Aerospace Corporation, Microcosm. What did you learn from them? And what practices do you seek to emulate at SpaceX? I know that was a long time ago. And what did you learn in your other roles that you resist as you have built and run SpaceX?
So it's interesting. All three of the companies that I worked for prior to SpaceX were very large. Well, with the exception of Microcosm, it was a small company, but it was still very bureaucratic. It was 100% kind of government contractor, full of bureaucracy and slow processes and painful crap that you have to deal with every day just to get something done. And so for sure, the thing that I wanted to shed and what really attracted me to SpaceX was This was going to be a very innovative environment with as little bureaucracy as possible. And that really excited me. I really wanted to go try doing this crazy thing. And the crazy thing was, like, I interviewed with Elon, and he says, well, we're going to build ships and put people on the surface of Mars. You know, now it seems normal to me. I don't know, does it seem normal to you? Is that like part of your normal thinking? No, not, no one. All right, well, it's normal to me now. It will be normal to you in 10 years. It was Abby normal 21 years ago when I interviewed with Elon, and I thought, this is crazy. But I thought, if SpaceX can't be successful, then the industry that I was in at the time, it was the aerospace industry, it will be no fun. Like, I don't want to work in this industry anymore. I'd rather be a barista, frankly, or sell real estate, than be in the aerospace industry if SpaceX fails. Because it just was so stodgy, uninspiring. I use the term constipated. And you really need to get away from that and do crazy things to really change the world.
So let's talk for a minute about that first interview with Elon. I guess a mutual friend brought you to meet him at SpaceX, and then the next day, his assistant called to ask if you'd be interested in interviewing for this VP for Biz Dev job. Can you tell us a little bit more about, like, that first conversation you had? What were your first impressions of him, and why did he decide to seek you out, and like all the people he might seek out for this really important role?
You'll have to ask him. But the interview, I don't remember everything about the interview, which is a little odd because I tend to remember, have odd, kind of keen memories. I do recall, because I was in the industry, and you hear a little bit about what Elon Musk, at that time you didn't even hear SpaceX, but what Elon Musk is doing in space. And I really felt like what he was trying to do needed a better storyteller or a storyteller. And I think I said, look, I really think you need to tell this story more broadly and maybe slightly different ways, because I wanted to see SpaceX succeed. And maybe he saw that I was quite interested in helping with that, telling that story, and bringing in customers. So, yeah.
When you made the move, because you'd already had, a good portion of a good career, did it feel risky to you?
Very risky.
Yeah, it must
felt
have.
very risky. But, I mean, I don't think people really succeed in life without taking some risks, actually. And though I wasn't looking for a job, but I had a couple other job offers at the time, same time I was chatting with Elon. That was by far the riskiest thing, but it was by far the most exciting thing. And so my gut was saying, you got to do that, you got to do that, you got to do that.
Did you go back and forth for a while?
I did.
Yeah.
I was such an idiot. Yeah, I was dithering for probably like a month. I think it was about a month. And then I was driving on the freeways in LA, and I called him. I'm like, I've been such an idiot. Yes, I want the job. And he laughed. I remember he laughed.
That's funny. Yeah. I'm sure he probably knew what the answer was. Did he give you the space to figure it out, though?
He did. Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about your day-to-day? And now you spend most of your time in Texas. You said you're the chief salesperson, but you still seem to interview people. But like, how does your day or your week look, and how do you think about organizing that?
My day never looks like what I anticipate the day to look like. I mean, my job is really to solve problems that people that work at the company for me or for Elon couldn't solve themselves, right? That's what it's either that or clearing the chaff from the folks that work for us, getting rid of friction and chaff so that they can do great work, focus doing great work instead of doing annoying crap. I live in Texas, but I think I'm probably on the road more. So I do spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C., spend a lot of time overseas with customers or stakeholders, really all with the goal of building the business, continuing to build the business, and ensuring that, at least knowing what are the hurdles that are a few years out and seeing if we can't kind of slowly break through. I do think going to Mars as a private company, I do think that will be bureaucratically difficult to do. Mm-hmm. Technically a challenge, of course, But I think there will be lots of bureaucracy that pops up that will make it hard to get there. And so I feel like we need to start working on that.
But everything you do has to do with kind of navigating or negotiating government bureaucracy. Where are you on Starship right now? So you had the one launch.
We had the one launch, extraordinary launch, by the way. And we've got the vehicle at the pad, and we're waiting for final regulatory approval to launch. Before we launch, we will have the Flight 3 ship and booster ready to fly. In fact, Flight 4 is not far behind. So I think what you'll find is we are waiting for the regulatory organizations to catch up and let us fly. And I do think that that is one of the things that will hold back innovation, certainly in this space, is the regulatory organizations. And by the way, they are not bad people, and they are working very hard, and it's a pretty thankless job. On the other hand, they are not set up to move at the pace of innovation. And if you want to innovate, we have to, certainly in this country and in plenty of others, we have to figure out a way to get the regulatory system to move at that pace. One example, and again, these are not bad people. This is their job to make sure that what we're doing is safe. We had the user terminals, the dishes for Starlink. We had the first version 1 of the terminal approved by the FCC. Version 2 was in the FCC approval process. We were ready to start selling version 3. So we got version 1 out in the wild, selling it. Version 2, we're trying to get approvals to sell. We're ready to sell version 3. And version 3 was less expensive for us to build, which the FCC wanted because they wanted us to lower our prices, but we couldn't get that system out to sell because it needed to be checked and verified and made sure it was safe. And so, that's a small example. It was certainly not the biggest hurdle that we had, but it's an easy example to digest, to say that in the United States, for sure, we need to address the speed of regulation.
And when you put the terminals globally, do you have to deal with regulators in all the different countries?
Every country. Some countries have up to 7 or 8 different licenses that must be obtained before you can service a terminal.
That's phenomenal. And all you're trying to do is bring internet to the world.
Correct.
Something that simple.
Yes.
But how would it be simple? You have said if you're not looking forward towards the future or trying to improve the current technology, you'll be left behind. Why is that? And how can companies make the most of that advice?
So we do have a relentless focus at SpaceX on doing better on the next cycle. And it's not just the next rocket design needs to be better. It's when you do that thing, that small thing, tomorrow do it better, do it faster, do it more efficiently. We just have this culture of speed. And if you can't do it better the next time, you're probably not doing it the same because something else occurred and got in your way. You're probably going slower. And so that was what I was trying to convey in that statement, that if you're not going faster and doing better, you're probably doing worse. Certainly, competition is a great way to look at this as well. If we don't obsolete, because we're quite successful, if we don't obsolete our own products, some smart business person is going to figure out a way to obsolete my product. And I'd rather obsolete my own than have them obsolete it for me.
So how do you keep those two parts of your culture going? On the one hand, you hire all these brilliant young people to do what you want them to do, right? They're building Starship, they're building rockets, they're launching satellites, and yet you want them to have a little bit of time and room to daydream for you in a sense and make the next thing happen. How do you have those two things going on at the same time, like following the Gwynne Shotwell agenda, and then
or the Elon Musk agenda.
Well, I mean, I'm just giving you full credit right now. You do have to run it day to day, so I'm sure his job is hard too, and then also innovating.
So you can innovate a new thing, or you can innovate what you're doing and do it better and faster. And we certainly expect employees to do that. But candidly, our employees are more enthusiastic about our mission and our vision than me. And I know I should be the most enthusiastic on the planet, but you get dragged down in day to day. And again, I'm trying to take all the crap off of people's desks, but man, these employees come to work and they love what they do and they work really hard. They're self-motivated. They're very excited about the mission and they want to do it better. They want to make sure their part or their process or their test is better tomorrow than it was today.
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
joining
Susie.
us today.
Great.
And have a great rest of the conference, folks.